In the previous 3 videos, we rigged a character for human IK by hand, and we created all the joints manually. In this video, we're going to create that entire skeleton structure automatically with the human IK system. So I'm going to Windows, Animation Editor, Human IK. And right now there's no characters in the scene. There's no skeletons, no control rigs. There's just a single mesh. So there is a quick rig tool, and I'll cover that later in a future video. But this time we're going to create the skeleton. And that should actually let me see something. So I'm going to say shading, X-ray joints. So let me do Control Z so I can do this again with the X-ray joints turned on. We could see that there's no, it still wants to bring up this skeleton menu. So it did create a character. I probably need to delete that character. I'm going to hit trash can. Are you sure you want to delete the current skeleton? Yes. Okay. Now let's do create skeleton, and you're going to see that it just automatically creates a human IK compatible skeleton structure. Now it might be bigger or smaller. Your character's mesh may be bigger or smaller. So at this point, if your character was way down here, then you would need to scale the character up into a good spot. In this case, that looks pretty good. So let's go through these options. I even have a scale option. So if I did want to adjust the scale of the skeleton to match the body, we could do that. But it only works in point increments. So you'll see I put a 1.1, and I can't do 1.05. for example. So here I would do 0.9, and that would get me back down to here. Or I could do another 0.9 and go down again. But I like the skeleton's position when it was created, where it's going to the end of the fingers. Now the spine, if we open up the reference image, I put a link to this image in the description, and what I did was I just named out all the joints. These will have different names though because the skeleton was created automatically. But we can look at all the bones that Mecanum needs, and we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to go from the hips all the way up to the head. So it's hips, spine, chest, neck, head. So back in Maya, with 3 spine joints, we can see that there's a hip, spine 1, 2, 3, neck, head. So we actually want 2 spine joints, because that's hips, spine, chest, neck, head. We want 1 for the neck, we want 1 for the shoulder. The finger bones you can set up, but for a human character, we're going to have all the fingers. I am going to reduce the number of bones to 2, because you could have 3 and just have a separate joint at the end. Some people like to have an extra joint at the end of the finger, but Unity wants 3 fingers, 1, 2, 3, or 3 joints per finger, 1, 2, 3. So with 3 finger bones, 1, 2, 3, 4 are created, because I believe 1 is used for the base. So I'm going to reduce the number of bones to 2 on the finger. That way the fingers actually have 1, 2, 3 joints, and that'll match up with the number of Unity joints. And down on the toe, that's already set up correctly. We just want the one toe base. Alright, so that skeleton is complete, and we're not going to change the name of it. If anything, you could change the name of character 1. So I'm going to use comment rename to select this, select the hierarchy. I'm going to search for character 1, and I'm going to replace it with, I'll just use the word male. Select hierarchy, search and replace. There we go. It did it that time. So now I just have the name male on there. I can see the... Well, first of all, when Maya creates this, let me rename the male reference to root. And then it's nice to have a name here instead of just plain old hips, I guess, like this shows. Because if you were to have multiple characters in the game, it would be nice to know the difference. Basically, in Unity has this bone structure as transforms, and their game objects are named the same as this. So if I just used hips, then every character in my Unity game would have just the plain old name hips, and it would be nicer to have, you know, the character 1 hips, the character 2 hips. That way, if I needed to search in the Unity hierarchy for a game object or for a character's hips, I could do a search by game object name for character 1 hips, and it would find that character's hips. So it is good to have this prefix on the bone name, as opposed to just the plain old hips, spine, chest, because that could be handy in Unity later. So here I'll change the name of root to male root. Okay, the Maya puts the spine down here, so I'm going to middle click and drag and drop it here. So we got hip, spine, left leg, right leg. And then if we expand the spine, I like to have the neck as the first child of the spine. That way we can go hip, spine, and this is the chest. I'll rename that. That way it matches up with Unity's Mecanum naming. So hip, spine, chest, neck, head. And then from there we got the left shoulder, left arm, left forearm, left hand. And again, if we did want to match up the naming on all those to Unity, we could. They're called shoulder, upper arm, lower arm, hand. So in this case, I could just select the entire hierarchy, go to rename, and search for left shoulder, and do a shoulder left. Let's do right shoulder, and make that shoulder right, or just shoulder R. And we could do shoulder left and change that to shoulder L. And then we got the upper arm, and that's called left arm. So just arm should be named upper arm. And if it finds left upper arm, then we'll do upper arm L. And if it's a right upper arm, we'll do an upper arm R. And for the left forearm, we got the left oh, we shouldn't have done arm, because now we got this four upper arm, and the 4 upper arm would need to get renamed to lower arm, and then left lower arm needs to get named to lower arm L, and right lower arm needs to get named lower arm R. And the left hand needs to get named to the hand L. And the right hand needs to get named to hand R. So the only reason we're doing that is so that the name of the bone, it matches exactly as McAdams does. Hip, spine, chest, neck, head. Hip, spine, chest, neck, head. And then we got shoulder, upper arm, lower arm, hand. So I got shoulder, upper arm, lower arm, hand. And the right should be named the same. And if we wanted to do the same for the leg name is upper leg, lower leg, foot, toes. So I'm going to select the hierarchy, comma, joint, rename. We're going to search for left up leg and replace that with upper leg L. And the right up leg would be upper leg R. And then we got the left leg. So left leg is lower leg L. And the right leg is lower leg R. The left foot is foot L. And the right foot is foot R. And then we got the left toe base. And that would be toes L. And the right toe base is toes R. So we got upper leg, lower leg, foot, toes. And that's what we got. Upper leg, lower leg, foot, toes. Upper leg, lower leg, foot, toes. Now I could go through and do the same thing for the fingers because Maya names the fingers as thumb 1, 2, 3, index 1, 2, 3, middle 1, 2, 3, ring 1, 2, 3, pinky 1, 2, 3. But I'm really not too worried about the name of the fingers. That works. I kind of prefer Maya's naming convention as 1, 2, 3 over the proximal, intermediate, and distal because I just don't. I've never called these. I've never really used these words, proximal, intermediate, and distal, so they don't mean anything to me. What makes a lot more sense to me is 1, 2, 3. So I kind of like Maya's naming convention there. All right, but we got the skeleton renamed. At least it's easy to match up in Unity's Mechanis system, and all the bones throughout the body except the fingers have the same exact name that Mecanum does. All right, so now I'm going to adjust the spine. I'm going to go to the chest bone, and I'm going to move the chest bone up. So I'm using W, and for some reason I got a free transform, so I'm going to try that again. I want to make my manipulators a little bit bigger. I'm going to go to Windows, Settings, Preferences, and let's go to the Preferences under the Display Manipulators section. And the handle size, and then we got the global scale. The global scale, there we go. That's what I want to change. I'm going to change that. It was at 0.5. I'm going to change it to 1. And let's make the handle size 40. All right, it's a little bit easier now for me to get in here. And that's a global setting, so if you're in another project and it seems like it's the wrong size, you'll have to go adjust that. But now I'm going to move the spine up. I want to get the shoulders into position. So that's probably not a bad spot. I can see that the shoulder left let's see, we got the shoulder right and the shoulder left. So on the shoulder right, I'm actually going to go to the upper arm left. I want to move this bone into a little bit more where I think it would be here. And the same goes for the elbow bone, but that actually lined up pretty good. So I'm going to go to the attribute editor and look at the axis. We got 13, so I'm going to go right to 14. And that means on the right arm, we're going to have to change this to -14. So we should be exactly the same there on the upper arm right and the upper arm left. And the wrist, will probably position that here pretty soon. The neck looks like it should go up a little ways. I'm going to go to the side view for that. And that looks pretty good. We can remember a lot of these bones we want to have perfectly straight, like the arms. We can move the elbow back though, but with the spine we can adjust the Z value, especially for the neck here, for the head. Or the head should be in a... The head should be down near the jaw, follow the jaw line up. I could see an ear, kind of an ear looking thing here, so the head maybe around here. And we got the neck in position, maybe just a bit up on that neck. No, it was good. And looking at the chest, this bone, I want this bone to be up a little ways. But I don't want to adjust the position of anything else. So I'm going to edit the pivot. Now, to edit the pivot, you could get to your tool settings and say edit pivot. I believe insert on the keyboard will do the same thing. And that allows me to move the bone without moving the children. So first and most important is to see the video about the spine the previous video about spine, because that covers where this should be positioned, but I want to put the spine basically in the middle of this curve. So maybe about here. And that looks pretty far back. Let's get the shoulder left and right and move those back as well. But we don't want to edit the pivot on that, because that's going to completely mess up the character. We want to move the whole arms back. And I know it doesn't line up with the mesh, but that's okay, because we're going to be moving the mesh into position over the bones. Alright, that looks better on the... Usually you got a further distance between these joints. So maybe I'll move that chest down again. I'm going to press insert on the keyboard to edit the pivot. And let's do something about here. I'm going to press insert again. Alright, that looks a little better. except the spine is going to come up a little ways. And this is going to be another edit the pivot, so I'm going to press insert. And this bone is covering the bend in the back that happens right here. So that's why I'm kind of lining up right in the middle of that area. And really it should kind of be between the belly button and the crotch area, so a little bit further down is probably okay on this bone. Alright, I think that's fine. Alright, we're moving down into the legs. The hip bone is, let's take a look at the hip. But the hip is nice because it's a 0, 0, 0. I'm in the attribute editor with a joint axis orientation of 0, 0, 0. So the hip is perfect. It's exactly where I want it. Moving into the legs, the only thing here with the legs is we're going to go straight down the leg, which means this bone's going to have to get moved over a little ways. But I'm going to press insert on the keyboard. I don't want to edit that pivot. So right to the front. I think that's lined up pretty good. And that's at a position on the X of -6.2. So let's try -6. And that's actually the Y orientation. So we're going to go to -12 here. Alright, so we got -6, -12. That means on the other leg it's going to be -612. Alright, the legs are in position. Let's take a look at the knee. And it looks like the knee needs to come up a little ways. Now I should be able to, just like the elbow, I should be able to edit the pivot on this one. And it should be okay to move it a little bit more into the actual knee position. And let's go over to the human IK and look at the definition to make sure we don't have an error on the validation status. But I really like the ankle bone to be back towards the here. But if I do this too much, I'll probably get an error on the leg that it's not straight. So far I'm not seeing an error, so I'm going to move a little bit back towards the ankle position. And let's make sure that we can either, well, yeah, we could select both of the bones when we do the movement so that we don't have to match up the transforms. But I'm going to just go to the attribute editor, look at the knees position here, and see that I got it at a, let's go to 1.5. And here we got -38, so how about -39? So -39, 1.5, and then on the other leg it's going to be -39, 1.5. So we'll just have to fix up this ankle position. We got the foot, and that is at a -47 and a -6. So let's get the foot fixed up at -47, -6. Alright, we should have a perfectly matching skeleton, but we don't. Is it just the toes that's different? Let's see, we got a -6 and 17. Let's try that over here. And I believe that should be a perfect match. Again, it's probably better when you're just making your edits to come down. Let's say we were working on the knee. Just select both of them like this. That way when you make a movement, you know that they're both exactly the same. But that should be good. All the bones are in a good position now. I feel like I would rather have the legs be nice and straight. They're too... but that's okay. That's alright. It almost looks like the hips and the legs should come up a little bit. I'm going to do that. Let's hit the hips and the upper and the lower leg. And I'm going to just edit the pivot on these. Just going to move them up a little bit. I feel like when the leg rotates, the pelvis is here. The leg bone should come up right up into about here. So that looks a little bit better. And we're ready to edit the mesh. Now, one last change on these legs. Just too big of angles down here. So I'm going to hit both of the lower legs, and I'm already editing the. Whoops! I'm going to edit the pivot. So I'm going to hit insert. I just want a little bit straighter lines coming down. All right. And checking out our human IK, our characterization is still valid. So now we're ready to edit the mesh. Now to edit the mesh, we just need to get the mesh to match up. It already does everywhere except in the arms. So in the arms, I'm going to go to my selection tool. I'm going to double click it so that I get my tool settings open. Or actually, I could just click onto, oh, it's open down here. So if I close my tool settings, I could get it open like this. And I'm going to go to soft selection, turn that on, and I'm going to go to the symmetry settings, and I'm going to turn on symmetry. World X or Object X is fine. And up here I'm going to go to the select by component type, and we want the point components and the parameter components. Let's see, I'm going to select right up to here. I'm going to tilt the camera this way a little bit so I don't get any vertices from this line. Alright, that looks good. Now we're going to go to E for rotate. And if you don't see that manipulator, click on that twice so that this is the main selected one. There we go. Alright, so I got my rotate tool, soft select and symmetry is turned on. And I'm going to edit the pivot here, so I'm going to press insert. That didn't work. I'll just click that button. We want to put the pivot where the joint's at. Really in the shoulder. But I'm going to kind of use my own position here. We're going to rotate kind of in the middle. There we go. And I'm going to press, we can click this to get out of edit pivot mode. And I'm going to go right to the front view. We want to edit this. I got a snap setting turned on. We want to line up the elbow with the elbow bone. And the fingers need to go to the finger bone. The only problem is the finger bones are straight. So I'm not trying to match up the end of the fingers to here because we're going to edit this mesh to make these fingers straighten out. Just like we're doing with the arm right now. So really, the hand's going to be a little bit lower. But I do want to get that elbow up near the elbow position. That'll probably work. And there's kind of this up angle here, so I could see that the arm's going to have to come down. But first, let's check if there's any rotation that needs to be done in this direction. Probably not, because that's really the elbows position. What we are going to have to do is press Q for the select tool and select everything up to the elbow. Make sure that nothing else is selected, and we're going to go to the rotate tool, edit the pivot position. Let's move that pivot back into the elbow. Alright, it's really slow when you edit the pivot. Okay, now we can, let's go to a top view and edit this, not the pivot. We want to edit the y-axis. Whoa. That looks pretty good. Alright, we're going to need to bring that down a little ways. But that does look kind of funny. Let me Control Z. I guess I can bring it down a little bit. Just trying to see what causes the arm go up here. Because it looks pretty much straight here, and then it gets here, and the arms... Let me try to edit the pivot and get that... I'm going to see what happens if I rotate it out by the shoulder. I guess that looks okay. Then we're just going to come do the hand. So we're going to select right up to the wrist. And we're going to have to edit the pivot, or go to the rotate tool, edit the pivot. And get this position back into the wrist. All right. What I'm lining up with the wrist is the first finger bones, these first finger bones, with this part of the hand right here. So it's lining up these bones. We're not worried about the end of the fingers when we're adjusting the wrist. But that looks pretty good. It looks like these bones are lined up good. So now we're getting just into the last little part, which is the fingers. The first part we'll select. And I don't want the thumb in this actually, because the thumb is separate. So we're down to, at least on this low poly mesh, manually selecting vertices. I want to get just the fingers and no part of the hand or palm. Alright, so just the fingers. Back to the rotate tool, edit pivot, and get that back, of course, to the base. You're always going, when you rotate, you're always going back to the bone. So we want to be where those finger bones are at. And essentially we're treating our current selection as the vertices that are affected by these joints weight painting. And we're going to be weight painting pretty soon. Alright, so back to the rotate tool. Let's rotate these up. So they're looking pretty flat. And now it's almost adjusting individual fingers. I'm going to speed it up for this part. And now that I have one finger selected, I'm going to turn soft selection off. And you might want to rotate it without moving the pivot back. There are times where, like here, you could use it perhaps to get that finger to flatten out. And then use the move tool to move the finger up a little bit. But really what we're doing here is trying to make all the fingers completely flat. I can see that we're going to have to rotate the hand once more, soft selection back on, and get that pivot position into the wrist. And we want to rotate it in this direction so that those fingers are nice and flat. And you can see that I really would want to get all the fingers flat. The index finger needs to move up. So back on the pinky again, and I could see the first two pink segments of the finger were going up, and these two are going down. So here I'm down to editing just two segments of a finger. Okay, so I think that's probably good. We've got the arms nice and straight. The elbows in a pretty good spot. The fingers we got the fingers flattened out. And now we just need to make those fingers match up into the right position. It's okay that we come in here and we're going to expand the hand left and the hand right. And what I'm going to do is select the same fingers. So I'm going to start with the pinky. And I selected both of them. So if I move them in the Z direction, that's okay. They should be in place. And going down, we got the pinky. Well, it's going to get difficult because we got to adjust the X. And if I move both the joints this way, that won't be any good. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to edit on the left hand. And I'm going to get the pinky one. Let's move that joint actually more up into this area. And then the pinky 2 is going to be right about there. And 3, a little bit more towards the end, the last segment. And then we got the ring, and that one's gonna come right about here. And we have to get the second finger in there. That's good. Third one right about there. And then we have the middle finger, and we got to move that about here. That's good. Finger there. Okay. And on the thumb, now that's why I like to first create the skeleton by hand, at least learn how to do that, because we've already covered thumb bone positions, and even when we use automatic rigging, we really need to know where these bones should be at. Alright, that should work for the fingers. The problem is the other hand is still messed up. So what I'm going to do is make sure that I'm on the rigging. So I could say skeleton, mirror joints. I'm going to hit the mirror joints option. And I want to mirror the, let's mirror all the way up from the shoulder. So I'm going to select the mirror joints on the male shoulder L, and we want to mirror, and we're going to search for L and replace for R, and I'm going to hit mirror. But before I do, I'm going to delete the entire right shoulder because all those names exist. And I don't want there's going to be a duplicate names. And that messes up the characterization. And I don't want to assign all the finger bones. That's going to take forever. So what I'm going to do is undo, back to here, and then we're going to save this character layout, and we'll save it as Mecanum Auto Skeleton. And now if I delete my right shoulder and I go to my left shoulder and I say skeleton mirror joints, replace the L with the R, mirror. The naming convention should all be right, except rower. No, rower arm right. We can email lower arm right. I guess that's the disadvantage to using just an L. All of the uppercase L's, which that looks like it was the only one. All right, but now we got to fix the arm, right? So because the name's exactly the same and the skeleton hierarchy is exactly the same, we could just say load. And I want to load the Mecanum Auto Skeleton, and that fixes the arm back up. So, but boy, does that thumb look funny now. So I'm going to go back to the thumb 1 on the right and the thumb 1 on the left. And that's even worse, but I want to move the thumb 1. I like the position of the other one, so let's hit insert. And it was just a little bit too much of a... that's a little better. Okay, so the rig is complete. the naming of all the bones is complete. The skeleton definition is complete. So we're right back to where we were when we, on the previous video, after we created this whole rig by hand. I prefer to use this method. And the reason why is we didn't have to do any joint orientation. So if I select the hierarchy and say show joint orients, it's pretty much already set up with the Z forward. There's probably a little errors down here on the wrist that could be fixed. That's a normal problem, and I just fixed that by disconnecting the fingers. Whoops, I didn't want to put them on the foot. Let me try to put them up here. Okay, so disconnect the fingers, go to the hand in the attribute editor, reset the joint orientation, and then bring the fingers back onto, and I'm middle clicking, of course, to drop that onto the hand. Let's do the same thing for the right hand. Okay. Alright, now looking at it, it looks a lot better. All the fingers are straight up and down. Oh, the thumb's a little bit off, but that's okay, because its joints are kind of coming down here funny. But all the arm, I can see all the head and neck. Bones look pretty good. So the feet and the ankle and the knees and the hips, all the bones are looking good, and we didn't really have to mess around with joint orientation. So I'm going to select the hierarchy and hide that access. Okay, in the next video we're going to be binding the skeleton to the mesh. That way when we move a joint, it moves the character's mesh itself. And after that, it's weight painting. Thanks for watching. Leave a like, subscribe. See you guys in the next video.